Katrina Strickland is a senior writer for Good Weekend magazine, and before that, its editor of 8 years. But she's also a great podcast host and an avid runner too, all of which is why she's joining us today to helm a discussion with me. I'm Konrad Marshall, and from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, welcome to Good Weekend Talks, featuring weekly in-depth conversations with fascinating people. Now, I don't quite count as fascinating, but I have recently released a book on a fascinating topic, running. It's called Run for Your Life, a year-long journey asking why we run, and explores a year I spent in constant motion, jogging and sprinting, shuffling and loping, while also interviewing some of Australia's most interesting runners. Now it's my turn to sit on the other side of the questions for once, with my old boss in the chair, so welcome, Katrina.
Thank you, Konrad, and welcome, Konrad.
It's great to be here.
I so enjoyed your book, just to begin with. I think it's a great conceit. I saw in one of the reviews they called this kind of book a stunt book, which I think is a bit unfair because it's a very good stunt.
Stunt memoir, according to Jason Steger. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. Konrad, I know you've written half a dozen or more other books, 3 of them on Richmond Football Club, your absolute favourite weekend pastime, and you've ghostwritten books for Ash Barty, Danny Laidley, Jackie O. But you obviously want, and you've always got a side hustle. I think you're one of those writers who always has a project on the go. I guess you could have come up with anything to do as your next side hustle. What made you decide to do a book on running?
You did. You did, Katrina.
Did I?
No, sort of. So we were sitting down at our end-of-year annual kind of Good Weekend powwow a couple of years back, and I was feeling really slovenly at the time. I was overweight at like 117 kilo. Not at all. But I was feeling sort of sluggish and like I needed to do something about it. And I don't know, we were talking about that notion of side hustles and writing projects. And I had been doing some ghosting for, high profile athletes and other people. And you were like, I think you should get out there and do your own book, like on some topic that's of interest to you. And I don't know, that sort of stuck with me, and I was sitting at the airport that day to fly back to Melbourne from Sydney and thinking, what would I like to write about? And I felt like running was this topic that was of broad appeal to so many people, and I just needed a way in, and the way in was a personal lens. It was like maybe I could make running my kind of personal project and then share that with others. And so I sort of sat on the plane kind of hatching this plan, like what would I do? Like, would I consult with running experts and try to, I don't know, break a certain time for a race? And at its core, I think I realized that my problem with exercise had always been sticking with it. So I came up with this idea of kind of going for a jog every single day for an entire year. Rain or shine, sickness or health, busy at work or in free time on holidays. I just had to make it work every single day, and that would hopefully tell me something about why it is that we run and what we can get from it and what it takes from us. But I also didn't want to write an entire book about myself. Like, a
true journalist, turn the microphone on someone else.
Exactly right. You know, they've got better things to say than me. They've been doing it longer. And so I just thought, well, put those journalistic kind of sports writing skills to use and try to get in touch with some people who are elite level runners, like Olympians that I'd interviewed before, people like Peter Boll, talk to sports scientists, talk to running coaches. And from there I was like, well, that actually seems like a fairly narrowly appealing book, to a certain subset of really psychotic, high caliber runners. So I instantly thought of the fact that there are that many interesting people out there who run, and they run for all different reasons. And it was very easy to start kind of Googling people and listing a bunch of names of CEOs and politicians and authors and artists and musicians who run. I thought, yeah, I'll go for a run with them too and learn what I can from them.
And isn't that interesting? Because people are evangelical about running, aren't they? And so you do know who runs, because if they've got any kind of profile, it tends to be written about. What is that about? Why do people get so evangelical about running? What is it about running that does that?
Well, I just think it's the rewards, right? That maybe it's something to do with that runner's high and the dopamine that you get afterwards, like that it does become a drug, it does become addictive. And I can certainly relate to that. I wrote into the book, and at some point I wanted the title of the book to be, I hate running, I love having run, because I don't know, I think that strikes a chord with a lot of people, right? They don't want to go out there. They know that it'll be the most challenging thing that they do all day. They do it at the start of the day, so it'll be the hardest thing, get it out of the way. And then they feel tremendous afterwards, but they also get all these benefits on the run. They come up with creative solutions to problems. They solve the problems of the world while on the jog. And I don't know, I don't kind of take that lightly now after a year of running. And you're right, though, so many of the people that I spoke to did become that way. Like I think of Husky Gowenda, the folk musician that I ran with in St Kilda. Now, he'd never been a runner, picked it up in COVID lockdowns, and it became this daily thing that is now pretty much indispensable to him. Like he has to start his day that way. And his music has, he says, become all the better for it.
I think you say when you wrote I hate running, and particularly at the beginning, I viscerally hated running. It took me to the Andre Agassi memoir Open, where he talks so wonderfully about when he met Steffi Graf, and they connected because one of them said to the other, well, I hate tennis. And the other one was like, oh, yeah, of course. Like, we all hate tennis. It made me think of that. Did your hatred of running change, and did you come to love it? Do you love it now? Tell us about the journey that you had in hate towards love about running.
It was very hard to get to love it throughout the course of the year, but I think that might have been part of that, the regimen that I'd set for myself, like running every single day.
That's a lot.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure I really recommend that to people. It was wonderful in the sense of it broke me out of a rut, and I needed it to be that strict in order to do so. But it just fatigues the same muscles again and again and again, and you get out there and it feels like a drag, and it's really hard to get through to that stage of the run where you're cruising and your breathing's good and your muscles don't ache and your knees are fine. But that said, as you get fitter, as you shed a few kilos, as your breathing improves, as you invest in new shoes that kind of pop and bounce, and you enroll in road races and trail runs and run with interesting people in interesting places, you do come to love a lot of aspects of it. And I certainly did. Like, I enjoyed seeing my times improve. Vastly, like I would say I probably only improved my kilometre pace by maybe a minute and a half over 12 months, which is not a lot when starting from scratch, but I did get better and it got more comfortable. And as much as a 27 kilometre run on a Sunday afternoon is like a pretty awful thing to do, there are kind of transcendent moments when you're out there and you're just into a groove. And even part of it is just recognizing what you're doing. Going like, there aren't many people who are out there right now, like having just run 23 and about to run 4 more. Like, there's an enormous feeling of achievement, and I don't know, it gives you a certain confidence going through your life as well. So I still hate running, but probably not as much as I did at the start of the project. So I probably run 3 or 4 days a week now, and mix it up with a few weights here and there. I'd like to stir in some Pilates or something at one point because I'm a very kind of inflexible person. But yeah, still hate running, maybe just love it a little bit more than I did too.
Love having run.
Yes.
Yes. And you quote in the book that your boss, which was me, and your wife both said, "Is it safe?" when you embarked on running every day. And then you went and interviewed physicians and experts on whether it was safe. What did you learn from them about, I guess, safety and protecting your body when undertaking a project like this?
Well, I was really rapt so I spoke to Dr. Andre Laguerche, who's one of the foremost kind of physiologists in the world, studies elite athletes, elite endurance athletes specifically, and examines their heart health to sort of track it over time and make sure that it is safe. And I was really vindicated by him when he looked at my early training in saying that taking the intuitive approach was the right way. So I didn't go out there and say, I'm going to run 5K every single day and I'm going to ramp up and run a marathon within 3 months. It was really intuitive. I was like, I'm going to stumble out there. I'll do 3K today. If I feel terrible the next day, I'll get through 2. And I'm not going to rush it. I'm not going to push it. It's going to be really gradual. And he said that was very smart. So anyone out there listening and thinking about running every single day, just trust your body, listen to your body. But he also said that doing this kind of thing, embarking on running from scratch, even with something like a marathon in mind within 6 months, is an absolutely smart thing to do. It is incredibly healthy, and it's within the kind of, I think he said it was within the hitting arc, right? So you're not trying something outlandish. The people that he worries about are the people that that train for those incredibly difficult ultra marathons and really punish their body every single day and get their totals up too high. They can lead to a certain amount of scarring on the heart and lead to some problems with arrhythmias later. But your average sedentary bloke getting out there and going for a jog and trying to make himself healthier, it's the wisest thing you can do. And the thing that really stuck with me for him is that doing this kind of exercise in your mid-40s, because when I started this, I was 46, it's a really important time to be laying down that sort of framework, to be getting strong, because you can't guard against things like heart attacks and strokes with complete certainty. As Andre likes to say, common things happen commonly. But what you can do is build strength to give yourself function going forward in life, to give yourself kind of capacity to be strong and move through the world with vigor and bend and jump and have a certain vitality going forward. And he quoted a runner, and gee, a lot of runners quoted this guy to me throughout the year. It was Amby Burfoot, who was a Boston Marathon champion many decades ago. And what was the exact wording? He said, I don't run to add years to my life. I run to add life to my years.
Such a great quote.
Isn't it?
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it, that the doctor's advice is kind of counterintuitive, because we're all told that it's dangerous to do this kind of thing, but actually it's more dangerous to stay sedentary. And I think you wrote that you were teetering on obesity, which you never looked, by the way, but
Thank you.
That's a BMI kind of index thing. And I thought it was interesting also that a whole lot of your other practices changed over the course of the year. So you weren't just running, your diet got better, your sleep got better. Tell us about those changes and how did they become kind of allied to the project in a way?
Yeah, it was funny. Some of those were intentional. So I kept getting little injuries here and there, and I had a physiotherapy team that would kind of help keep this rusty old car on the road. And they would give me advice around like the certain kinds of stretching that I needed to do and the particular sort of strength work and stuff that I could do in the gym to really kind of scaffold these poor muscles that I was punishing every day. So I began to do a little bit more working out that wasn't running, which was it. And I'm still sort of doing that as well. And then some of it was just what you begin to feel in your body. When you've gone out for one of these very long runs, your body kind of, it needs fuel, it craves fuel. And honestly, suddenly those big plates of vegetables and a bunch of protein just looked more appealing. And then you're also reading about what you should be fueling your body with, and you begin to feed that into your diet as well. And then, you drink less as well because, you don't want to be hungover. You don't even want to be a little bit fuzzy after having 2 late wines or something if you've got to get up and get out there on the pavement at 7 a.m. And you certainly don't want to be having a couple of beers on a Friday night if you're going to do one of those 27K runs the next day. So you immediately begin taking that out, and that combined with the energy that you're expending just ends up leading to better sleep. Like I slept better in that year than I had in years and years prior. And I can only put that down to the diet and the exercise, and one fuels the other, and you become this sort of flywheel that takes off until you're really humming, which is what I felt like at the end of that year.
Yeah, at the end you talked about feeling a bit like an elite athlete, which is an amazing place to get to. I think one of the really interesting things I found through the book was this kind of toggle between it being a solitary pursuit. You just go out your front door with your runners on. You don't have to put podcasts in your ear. You don't have to run with someone. And the things that come from that, you talk about pushing through the wall, and that Trent Dalton, the writer, talks about, the ideas for how to write a story. And you said this as well. They might not come while you're running, but they come at the bubbler when you're drinking water afterwards. And you had Grace Tame and Tracy Westerman, the psychologist, talking about how it would help them deal with trauma. So there's all those kind of solitary things. And yet on the other side, run clubs have, since the pandemic, become massive. Most of us run with something in our ears, whether it's music or podcasts. So in another way, we've taken it out of the solitary in more recent times and made it a group thing. Even if it's just the group in your ears that you're listening to. Tell us about that, and whether for you it's still mainly solitary, or if you do think of it as more a thing with others.
We wrote about run clubs in Good Weekend magazine. You commissioned that story from me a couple of years ago because they were exploding all around the world. And I remember going out for runs with a bunch of them, because that's what we do with these long form pieces, is get out there and meet people where they are. And I loved what those groups can provide, a sense of community, but also a sort of rhythm to people's week. Like it's just something that they do on a Saturday morning. They meet their running friends and they have a jog and they have coffee and a pastry afterwards. I did embark on the project as a very solitary runner, and it does get sort of lonely and miserable out there. So I'm a podcast listener, sometimes a little bit like Ned Brockman, who I interviewed for the book. I put the music on when I need a little extra kick to get me going. But I don't know, I started running maybe 20 odd years ago. Like this wasn't the first time I've had a kind of a jag where I've wanted to do a lot of running. I ran a marathon in upstate New York, and I remember that sort of started with a run club. I had written a column for a little newspaper I was working for, just complaining about how miserable it is out there to run by yourself. And they invited me along, the Adirondack Runners. Come to one of our breakfast runs. We all go off and do a jog of a different distance, and then we bring food and all have breakfast together. And it was this great little community. And I feel like all the way throughout my life, when I've done running, I have sought those groups out, and I sort of do the same thing even now after this project. Like just last weekend, I ran a Tough Mudder race. Now, it's one of those stupid ones. It's 15 kilometers, 30 silly kind of boot camp obstacles to get over. I never would have done that by myself, but if I could rope in 2 of my little brothers to come along with me, then it was fun. It was like sort of adult play in a way. And now that we've done that, I've sent out a message to my brother's WhatsApp group, like, who wants to do Run the Rock half marathon in 2 months? And I'll get them along for that. And so even if I'm not out there training with them every day, if we're all working towards the same goal together and we've got this thing on the horizon, then it does feel communal, and it's just much more palatable when it is communal. I'm sure there are people that can go out there and just run by themselves and don't need any of this connection, but I'm just not one of them.
I think it's not a coincidence that the rise of run clubs has come with the rise of singledom and people living in their own apartments, not with extended family. And it strikes me that in a way, that kind of group thing replaces what was once the church, that you're going to see a group of people who you're perhaps not super close to, but you have this incidental thing that you do with them that takes you outside of the regular day and the regular thoughts and takes you somewhere else.
It was supercharged by the pandemic as well. Like, let's not forget that.
Loneliness, the loneliness epidemic, that kind of thing. Yeah. People locked down in their own little spot, no connection whatsoever. They ran alone, and then once everything opened up, they wanted to do it with others. And I think we tracked it in that run club story. Things like park run just surged immediately after COVID. Yeah. And tell me, in terms of what you've learnt that might be of use for other runners during the course of this project, what springs to mind as the really great tips that you got from all these people who run professionally and not professionally?
Well, I would say find what works for you with running. Like, I'm not out there to do what half of the people I ran with do. They set these crazy fustigating totals. They do 10 kilometers a day in the morning. Like, one guy I ran with, he legitimately gets up at 3 a.m. and at 3:15 he goes and runs 10 kilometers, and then he gets into the gym for 45 minutes, and then he goes home and feeds his little ones and goes off to work. Well, that's not going to work for me. That's just not going to happen. I don't want to run late at night, and a lot of women can't run late at night. They just don't feel safe, and I completely understand why. But I found what works for me, and that's I snatch half an hour out in the morning, although I hate mornings, because then it's done and I don't have to worry about it. But maybe it's different for you. Maybe you can only find the time at lunchtime, or maybe you need to do it just before dinner so that you can kind of de-stress from the day and go away and enjoy your evening. So find what works for you in terms of time of day, in terms of distance, in terms of where you go, whether you're an individual runner or whether you need the group support. Even find what works for you with listening. Like, yes, I listen to podcasts, other people listen to music, but I met a few raw doggers too. They just want to listen to nothing and jog through the sounds of the bush around them.
Yeah. My mother always said she'd never seen a happy-looking jogger. My dad loved jogging, so that was her little way to needle him. But one of the things that struck me is two of the best runners, that you interviewed, Peter Bol and Gout, they both just had this absolute joy with running. Peter Bol talked about how amazing it was that he got to see the world through running, and Gout similarly just had an absolute kind of joie de vivre about it. Did that surprise you?
Yeah, it did. It did, actually, because in particular, Pete, because I don't know if you've run 800 meters or tried to do it at the competitive, sort of not their level, but in a competitive sense. It's just painful. Like, it's got to be one of the worst events out there, I think. You're virtually sprinting for, 2 full laps of that ass track. The lactic acid that must be building up, the burning in the lungs, like, it looks utterly miserable. But for him, it was, running was a passport to see the world. He grew up mostly in Perth, and their family was never going to be taking a trip to Italy or any of the fancy places that he races around the world. They'd barely make it on a holiday to Broome. But for him, it became this ticket to explore the globe. And I love the way he leans into that too, like by reading books about all of the places that he goes to compete, and getting out into the community and sort of meeting people there. And I think he's, an interesting case because not a lot of them do that. A lot of them just lock in on that task and go from hotel to track, back to hotel, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's Peter Boll, right? Deeply impressive figure.
Yeah. You also talk about, speaking of Peter Boll, going to the Olympics and that you did the Paris Marathon. Just tell us briefly about that, because that just, for anyone who's a runner, that just sounds so evocative and kind of beautiful. How was it in real life?
God, it was wild. I'd been in Paris 3 weeks, I think, before the games, gearing up for it, and then 3 weeks of covering the Olympics. So just really long shifts every single day. You're exhausted, just exhausted. So really not ideal prep. But this particular marathon, the Marathon Porto, was held overnight. So it started at 9 p.m. I knew it was going to take me 4 or 5 hours to get it done. So I'd be, running through the streets of Paris at midnight, which is wild. But yeah, you set out from the town hall. It was so muggy. It was just unbearable. It was really oppressive. And then just as you're sort of kicking into gear and the running starts to get hard, you're hitting the hills of Montmartre. And then you're going out to the Palace at Versailles, and that's sort of lit up, and then it gets really desolate with some big hills, and everybody's throwing up everywhere, and the porta potties are just a scene. And it was starting to get really rough, and that's when the Eiffel Tower came back into view, and it was sparkling and lit up, and you're schlepping by, sort of half walking, half jogging, but it's pinch me stuff, right? It was the very last night of the Olympics. My assignment was about to end.
We should clarify, it wasn't the Olympic marathon. It was one for anyone who wanted to join in. Is that right?
Yeah, 20,000 runners took part, but it was on the official track, the official course of the Olympic marathon, which was said to be the most brutal marathon course in Olympic history because of those hills. And yeah, I finished at about 2 a.m., started having full body convulsive cramps in calves and quads and everything else, projectile vomited, and then passed out and went to bed.
And then that brings us to the end of the book, where you decide that you want to do your own ultra marathon for the last day of the year, December 31 to 2024, and you map out a route that's about 50-something kilometres. But then tell us what happens when you get to, I think, something in the 30-kilometre mark, and then what you learn from that.
Yeah, I mapped out this route in a little country town in regional Victoria, where I've got a place that I stay, and I guess it was just a hotter day than I had run in over those kinds of distances. I think it was pushing about 27, 28, which doesn't sound like much, but when there's no tree cover, no shade whatsoever, and you're just out in it for those hours, it took a toll. And there must have been something wrong with my fueling, like with the gels I was taking in, or the snacks, or the water, or something wrong with the balance, because I got to about 35 kilometers in, I think. And again, just I couldn't move. My calves were popping, the quads were, the hammies, everything was sort of shutting down and spasming wildly. And then I just emptied my guts, threw up. I don't know, my friends said I had people coming along and helping me with this run, and a few of them that saw the violent vomiting episode were like, I've never seen anybody throw up that much liquid in such a short amount of time. And I jogged, limped, shuddered my way through till I got about 42 kilometers in and called it quits there. So I did not achieve my goal of running an ultra marathon, but I ran the marathon, my own private one. So that's 2 marathons in a year. and my grand total for the 12 months ended up being 1,999 kilometres at a daily average of 5.5K, which I'm very proud of.
And I love that you use that not as an example of having failed your goal, but it is an example of, in a way, what running is. It's it's got things that don't go your way. It's got things that go your way. You've still achieved this amazing thing. We haven't even got into the marathon poo preparation, but people will need to read the book for that. That chapter was one of my favourites. Congratulations, Konrad. It's such a fascinating book, and I think that anyone who's a runner will lap it up, and it's got a lot of psychology as well as athletic tips. So well done.
Thank you so much, Katrina. How's your running going?
Oh, I've become a not very good runner. Maybe I need a new project like this.
Well, you swim too, right? So maybe you can swim every day for a year and write a book about that.
I'm a bit lazy for projects like that.
Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you.
This episode of Good Weekend Talks was produced by Konrad Marshall and edited by Tim Mummery. Our executive producer is Tammy Mills. Lisa Muxworthy and Tom McKendrick oversee our podcasts, and Melissa Stevens is the editor of Good Weekend. To read more of our in-depth journalism from the latest edition of Good Weekend, visit us at theage.com.au or smh.com.au. And if you enjoyed this episode, follow our podcast and leave a review on Apple or Spotify. I'm Konrad Marshall. Thanks for listening.